السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. فيا أيها الناس أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. وقال سبحانه وتعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped except for Him. And we bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His final messenger. And we ask Allah to send peace and blessings upon Him and those who follow His footsteps until the day of judgment. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, one of the most important chapters in the Quran that talks about the manners and etiquettes of Muslims is Surah Al-Hujurat. The verses in Surah Al-Hujurat are commandments from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the mu'mineen, to the believers, teaching us how to deal with certain scenarios and situations of conflicts between ourselves. And among the verses in this surah, one of the most famous and well-known verses is the following verse. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O mankind, indeed we created you from a male and a female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know one another. Surely the most noble among you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous among you. Allah is truly all-knowing and all-aware. And this is a fundamental principle in Islam that teaches equality between human beings. And the only factor that decides the level and nobility of a human being is his taqwa, is his fear towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which can only be known clearly by Allah Himself. And Allah also tells us that we have all been made and created differently. So it is inevitable that there will be some differences in opinions and ideas between not only humans but also within us Muslims. And these differences are not meant to divide us or to put each other down, but for us to learn from each other and demonstrate the diversity within Islam, as long as these differences are within the boundaries of Allah's Sharia. And one of the great examples that demonstrates how the companions, the Sahaba, used to deal with the differences within themselves was an incident that happened after the Battle of Ahzab. And this is also known as the Battle of Khandaq. Since in this battle, in the Battle of Ahzab, the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza in Medina, they betrayed the Muslims. So right after the Muslims came back from the battle back to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, he immediately told everyone, none of you should pray Asr until he reaches Banu Qurayza. None of you should pray Asr until he reaches Banu Qurayza, which means that they should hurry up and they should go there right now. And you can do your Asr prayer once you reach there, once you reach to Banu Qurayza. And however, this news, of course, didn't reach to everybody at the same time. So a group of Sahaba, they heard the news later. And by the time they heard it, it was already almost Maghrib. The time for Asr is almost ending. So this group of Sahaba, they were in a disagreement. One group of them thinks that this is an exception from the Prophet ﷺ, and they should only pray Asr once they reach there, even if it means missing the time of the prayer. So this is the opinion of one group. But the other group thinks that the 5 daily prayers should always be offered on time, no matter what circumstances. So one group went ahead without praying Asr, and the other group stayed and they offered the Asr prayer. And eventually they reached there. So when the two groups arrived and they told the Prophet ﷺ about this issue, this disagreement between themselves, what did the Prophet ﷺ respond? He did not disapprove or deny any of them. He didn't say that one group is wrong and one group is right. He didn't deny any of the groups. And this is a very important story. It shows us that when both sides are qualified to make ijtihad, when both sides are qualified to make judgment, then they don't have to listen to one another. Both sides sincerely think that they are more correct without considering their own desires. And they didn't criticize each other or call each other as deviants or innovators. The Prophet ﷺ also said that when a judge gives a decision, after trying his best to decide correctly, and eventually he is correct, then there are two rewards for him. And if he gave a judgment after trying his best, but it turns out to be incorrect, then there is going to be one reward for him. And there is another interesting story during the battle of Mu'tah. This battle occurred shortly after Sayfullah, the sword of Allah, Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu, after he converted to Islam. And this is also the first battle that he had siding with the Muslims. And during this battle, all the three leaders of the companions, they were martyred, including Zayd ibn Haritha and Ja'far ibn Abi Talib and Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiallahu anhum. So then after the three of them were martyred, the companions, they appointed Khalid ibn al-Walid to be their leader after all of three of them were killed. And during this battle, there was a companion who killed one of the enemies who had very luxurious weapons and armors. And according to our Sharia, of course, he gets to have all of that for himself. He killed the enemy himself, so he gets to get all the war booty for himself. But however, Khalid, he himself, he didn't know about this rule because he just converted to Islam. And so he thought that all this war booty was too much for one person. So he ordered this man to give it to the army. So after they returned back to Medina, this man, he immediately went to complain to the Prophet ﷺ. And after the Prophet confirmed what happened during the war, he ordered Khalid to return this all back to the man. And after he did that, the man, he scoffed. And he began to mock Khalid and boasting that the Prophet ﷺ stood on his side instead of Khalid's side. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he heard this, he became very angry. And he ordered Khalid to not give him anything. Don't give him his armor, his weapons back. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he told the man, "Will you not leave my commander? Take the good and leave the bad." So this story tells us that sometimes even if we are right, our pride shouldn't lead us in the wrong direction. Even though Khalid, his understanding was wrong, but he did judge according to what he knew at that time. And eventually, he is not the one who was blamed, but instead the man who was boastful. And this is also not to say that the rulers or the leaders are exempt from any type of criticism. Because had this man kept his respect for Khalid as a leader, then he wouldn't have been reprimanded by the Prophet ﷺ. Especially in the case of one group transgressing and oppressing against another group without judging according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. The Muslims are commanded and obliged to fight against the transgressor. And this was also mentioned in Surah Al-Hujurat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيءَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ فَإِن فَاءَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. If two groups of believers, two groups of mu'min, they fight each other, then try to make peace between the two of them. But if one of them transgresses against the other group, then fight against the transgressing group until they are willing to submit to the rule of Allah. And if they do so, then make peace between both groups in all fairness and act justly. Surely Allah loves those who uphold justice. So if the transgressing group, the violating group, if they do not listen to advice and they insist on harming the other group while not obeying the rules of Islam, then they should be opposed and fought until they have decided to submit to Allah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they will make decisions that are favored and liked by every single Muslim. It's impossible. But as long as it is within the laws of Sharia, then the commands of the rulers should be obeyed and should be criticized if they go against the boundaries of Islam. Many of our predecessors and scholars of the past, for example, the four Imams, and also Imam al-Nawawi, Imam al-Suyuti, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahumullah, may Allah have mercy on all of them. Despite the pressure and potential consequences they had to bear, they used to fearlessly speak out the truth and criticize against the rulers with dignity and with respect. And this also shows that being a scholar is not just about gaining knowledge and living a comfortable life and being secluded from the community. On the opposite, knowledge comes with responsibility and sacrifices. These scholars of Islam, they were not exempted from hardships, and they had the responsibility to stand out and speak against injustice to preserve the truth for the ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the strength and courage to speak out the truth even during hard times. May Allah bless us with harmony and peace among our Muslim ummah, and may Allah help us in upholding justice and fairness in our circumstances. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله الواحد الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.各位教亲，在古兰经当中，关于穆斯林的风范跟礼仪相关的最重要的其中一个章，就是Suratul Hujurat 寝室章。那寝室章里面的内容包含了真主命令信士们如何在人跟人之间发生冲突的时候的应对方式。那在这一章里面，其中一节最著名、最重要的经文就是这一节。يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير。众人啊，我却已从一男一女创造了你们，我使你们成为许多民族和部落，以便你们互相认识。在安拉看来，你们当中最尊贵者，是你们当中最敬畏者。Allah 却是全知的，却是彻知的。那这是伊斯兰的其中一项基本的原则。真主教导我们所有人类之间都是平等的，但是唯一一个决定一个人的地位跟高低，就是他对真主是否敬畏，他是否有 taqwa。而关于这一点，当然只有真主是最清楚的。那真主也告诉我们，他把我们创造成不同的个体，所以不管是单纯的人与人之间，甚至是穆斯林跟穆斯林之间，肯定会有不同的想法跟观点。但是这些差异，并不是为了要分裂我们，或者是让我们互相的去贬低，而是让我们可以互相的去学习，展现伊斯兰的多元性。不过当然，前提是这些差异都是在真主所制定的律法里面。 那其中一个由圣门弟子之间发生的最经典的例子，就是某一次在壕沟战役之后所发生的一件事情啊。因为在壕沟战役的时候，麦地那的这个犹太部落 Banu Qurayza 他们背叛了穆斯林，所以当穆斯林一从战场回到麦地那之后呢，我们的先知sallallahu alaihi wasallam他就宣告了所有人，在抵达 Banu Qurayza 以前，你们不要理阿瑟。OK， 先知告诉了所有的弟子们，在抵达 Banu Qurayza 以前，你们不要理阿瑟啊，也就是说，大家现在立刻赶往 Banu Qurayza， 你们到了之后，在那边再理阿瑟。不过因为人群很多，那有些人比较晚听到消息，所以当消息传到他们身边的时候呢，阿瑟已经快要结束了，已经快要到 Maghrib 的时间了。所以这个时候呢，他们之间就出现了分歧。有一群弟子，他们认为这个是先知他给的特例，啊，就是说，就算会错过，也一样要先抵达到那里，再礼阿瑟。但是另一群弟子，他们认为说礼拜这么重要，啊，不管在什么情况下，都应该要准时礼才对。所以呢，一群弟子，他们选择不理阿瑟，继续前进，到了那边之后才礼阿瑟。另外一群弟子们，他们选择留下来，礼完之后，他们再过去。那当他们都抵达之后呢，他们就告诉了先知sallallahu alaihi wasallam他们之间发生了什么事情。那先知他在得知了之后呢，他怎么回应？先知他并没有否定任何一方的决定，他并没有否定他们的决定。那这个故事就非常的重要。这件事就告诉我们，当双方都有做决定的资质的时候，他们是不需要听从互相的指示的。他们双方都认为自己是正确的，但是他们并没有互相的批评，或者是谩骂，或者是指控对方是叛教的，或者是异端者。我们的先知sallallahu alaihi wasallam他也说过，如果一个正直有资格做判决的领袖对某一件事情做出判决，而且到最后他的判断是正确的话，那他的赏赐会是2份。但是假如他的判断最后是不正确的，那他的赏赐会是1份，他还是会有赏赐。那有另外一个有趣的故事，是在穆塔的战役的时候发生的。啊，这场战役是在 Khalid ibn Walid radiyallahu anhu 他皈依伊斯兰没多久之后呢发生的。啊，这个也是他作为穆斯林参加的第一场战役。在这场战役当中，弟子当中的3位杰出的领袖都殉难了，啊，包含了 Zayd ibn Haritha、Ja'far ibn Abi Talib 以及 Abdullah ibn Rawaha， 这个 radiyallahu anhu。那所有剩下的弟子们就指派了 Khalid 作为他们的领导。那在这场战役当中呢，有一位弟子，他杀死了一个敌人。那这个敌人呢，他有非常非常奢华的武器跟装备。那根据我们 Islam 的教法，这个人他是有权利可以自己收下这些战利品的，他可以自己独自收下这些奢华的装备跟武器。但是 Khalid 因为他自己才刚加入伊斯兰没有多久，所以他自己不知道有这项规定。所以当他看到这个弟子自己收下这么庞大、这么奢华的战利品的时候呢，他觉得不妥，所以他就命令这个弟子呢，把他的装备全部交给部队。那当他们都回到麦地那之后呢，这位弟子就跑去跟先知sallallahu alaihi wasallam告状，向他解释了来龙去脉。那当先知他确认这件事情之后呢，先知就命令 Khalid 把装备还给这位弟子。那在先知一讲完之后呢，这个弟子他就嘲讽 Khalid， 啊，就炫耀先知是站在他那一边的。那当先知听到这一点之后呢，先知sallallahu alaihi wasallam就命令 Khalid， 不要还给他任何东西，不要把装备还给他。然后先知就告诉这位弟子，你能不能不要这么跟我的领袖计较呢？你带走他们的优点，放下他们的缺点，忽视他们的缺点。所以这个故事也告诉我们，有时候就算是我们的观念是正确的，但是我们的骄傲不应该把我们带向错误的道路。 尽管说在这个例子里面 Khalid 他的理解是错误的，但他也是根据他当下所知晓的知识做出判断，而到最后被责怪的人不是 Khalid， 而是这位这个弟子。那这也并不是暗示说穆斯林的领袖就可以免受任何的批评，因为假如这位弟子他保持对 Khalid 的基本的尊重，他也不至于会被先知扫罗萨姆给责备。那尤其是当一个群体被另外一个群体不依据真主的命令跟规范侵犯跟压迫的时候呢，穆斯林是必须要起身对抗侵犯者的那一方的。那这也是在苏拉图的 Hujurat 在寝室章里面有提到的。真主他说，如果有两群姓氏互相争吵，不是单纯的两群人是两群的姓氏互相的争吵，那么你们应该要尝试在中间调解。如果其中一方压迫另外一方，你们就应该要对抗压迫的那一方，直到他们遵从真主的命令为止。如果他们愿意服从，你们就应该要公平的调解，维护正义。真主是喜爱公平的人。那如果压迫的那一方是迟迟不遵守伊斯兰的教法，不愿意听劝，执意要侵犯另外一方，那穆斯林就必须要反抗，直到他们愿意去顺从真主的旨意为止。这并不代表说压迫方停止压迫之后所做的抉择一定会被所有的穆斯林给接受，这是不可能的事情。但是只要这些抉择是在伊斯兰的教法的范畴以内，那么穆斯林的领袖的抉择就必须要被遵守。而如果跨越了伊斯兰的界限，那也必须要被批评跟指正。那许多先贤跟伊斯兰的学者，他们都曾经在庞大的压力下，仍然勇敢地面对事实，并且有尊严地批评他们的穆斯林的领袖跟统治者所做出的决定。他们也因为讲出事实而遭遇了痛苦的刑罚。那这也告诉我们，作为一个学者，不是只是单纯学习新知识，远离人群，过着安逸的生活。相反的，知识伴随而来的就是责任跟牺牲。这些过去的伊斯兰学者，他们并没有免于艰难跟困苦，他们肩负着责任，勇敢站出来对抗不公，为了整体的穆斯林的群体维护真理跟公道。我们祈求真主赐给我们在困难的时刻仍然能够说出真相的勇气跟力量。求真主赐给我们穆斯林群体和谐还有平安，也求真主使我们在任何环境下都能够秉持正义跟主持公道。Ibadallah, inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداء الدين واحمي حوزة الإسلام يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا افتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا. ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون